All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've had a great day so far. It is my pleasure here this afternoon to introduce Lindsay with Honeycomb Strategies. Honeycomb Strategies works with venues, events, and hospitality, and their sustainability programs. She has worked with some of the largest and most sustainable events in the industry, down to some small startups, and helped them get their programs off the ground from scratch. We know sustainability is important in the events industry, and so with that, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Lindsay.
Having me here. I don't know if I need this. You can hear me? All right. Is my presentation showing? Nope. All right. So my name is Lindsay Arell. I'm with Honeycomb Strategies. And when I first put together kind of this presentation, this was before COVID, and it was about collaboration between event organizers and suppliers. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to spend some time just a little bit at the end also talking about how do we still be sustainable post-COVID when, you know, a lot of the conversation is around, you know, plastics and disposables now and all the things we've been working on for so long to kind of help increase sustainability, really trying to make sure that those things don't get thrown out the window when we do go live again. So thank you so much for having me. I was I wasn't sure like how the group would be, so I was going to do some introductions, but I know we have online audience, but so today, just like I said, I want to introduce myself, talk about why event sustainability is important, and then we're going to go through a standard called the APEX Sustainability Standard. It's an industry-wide standard. And then just to kind of demonstrate what that is, I was going to kind of do a deep dive into a venue and then go through some thoughts around some COVID new normals and then wrap up and take questions. Does that sound good? All right. So like I said, I'm with Honeycomb Strategies. We believe sustainability is both a great opportunity and responsibility. So some of the people we work with in Denver, we work with the City and County of Denver Arts and Venues, so Red Rocks, the Colorado Convention Center, McNichols, some very large venues, Visit Denver, and then we also work with stadiums. Not on here is the Pepsi Center. We work with the Philadelphia Eagles and SoFi, the new stadium in Englewood, California, and then large events. So sustainable brands, Expo East and West, some of those. So when we talk about sustainability, I'm really looking beyond just the environment and really looking at sustainability in terms of economic sustainability and social issues as well. And that's really kind of the sweet spot of how we work with our clients and with venues to really create programs that are purposeful, that aren't just a recycling program, but have a larger impact. And so, one of the questions that I get with that, especially as we're going to be reopening and resources are really tight, and when you think about what's going to be kind of taken off the table, event sustainability may not seem like a really crucial piece to kind of continue to have in your program. But I'd actually say the opposite. Our programs really do, when you're talking about sustainability, you should be looking at how can you actually save money. So by being more resourceful, you really do have the ability to really save some money. It also requires you to have increased collaboration because you really have to work with your suppliers to kind of share your goals and see what they're doing and really find solutions to some new ways of doing things. It also really has the ability to have a positive impact on communities, especially right now when we know that so many people are struggling. And it really kind of, I think, spurs a lot of innovation and thought leadership. And really, as we kind of move forward, there's more and more corporate risk if you're doing corporate events, regulations. So just getting ahead of that and just incorporating that into your way of doing business, I think is smart. Plus, event organizers want it. So this was the results of a survey back in 2016, which seems like a lifetime ago, from the Events Industry Council. But basically just showing that this is something that event organizers are asking for, and I would argue that these numbers have increased in my experience in the last 4 years. Oops. And we know that if this group and other event organizers really start to implement some sustainable practices, we actually have the opportunity to make a huge impact, because we are a huge industry that by making some small, seemingly small choices in our events have a pretty big ripple effect. So I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about the foundations of sustainability as they relate to an event. So really looking at your venue suppliers and your supplier selection. So like I said, communicating with them, looking at what materials you're buying and using for your event, your food and beverage, assessing your carbon emissions, not only for the venue, but also how your attendees are getting there, and how your exhibits are getting to the show. And then looking at your reduction of energy and water, and that's often through use of talking with your venues and your suppliers, making sure that you are tracking all of these impacts. And then one that I think should have, isn't often thought of, I guess, with regards to sustainability, but really is really diversity and inclusivity. So it's a lot of things to wrap your head around, and so I think one of the easiest ways to get started is to really kind of utilize some of the standards that have been created in the industry, because they provide a good checklist. I think that you can pick and choose from what makes sense for you, what doesn't make sense for you, what applies to your events. And they're also industry-wide accepted criteria. So, are you guys event organizers or, yeah, okay, some suppliers or, okay. So, I kind of wear both hats sometimes. So as a supplier, I want to get the information requested to me from an event organizer the same way every time. So if I have someone that's asking me for their waste data, then I can put together a program and a place, in place that I can train my staff on, this is the way that we track data and this is how we report data. And then that event organizer can take that and they can take that information and compare it apples to apples at the next venue they go to. So standards help kind of create that consistency. And they also really provide a roadmap of best practices so that we all know, again, as we're kind of speaking the same language. So we know that for a recycling program, we want to have, I'm looking for your recycling bins here, a landfill bin and a recycling bin should be paired together. And we know that becomes a best practice. And so the more consistency, the better, I think, in kind of creating programs that are easy to implement from location to location and are easy to talk about from event organizer to event organizer. Standards also, they provide some transparency and some credibility to what you're doing. They hold your teams accountable. If you actually go through with the certification, that may be a competitive advantage, and it really enhances your reputation. So I have a lot of slides here, so I'm going to go through these really fast. I was looking at it, I was like, wow, these are like 2 presentations combined. Are you guys familiar with the Events Industry Council that's on the national level? Okay. So they created this standard that we're going to be going through, and it's 6 standards for event organizers and suppliers, going over kind of all the areas that we just talked about. There is a third-party verification, and they replaced the former Apex ASTM standards, which were pretty cumbersome. There are 4 levels, similar to like a LEED certification. And these are the standards. So event organizers, there's one for you all that you can take, and it's just a checklist, and it has checklist questions for accommodations, for your AV, for your destination, et cetera. And then for our suppliers, there's specific criteria to your operation. So as a venue, the Colorado Convention Center, we would go through and we have our own checklist, and they kind of like talk to each other. So that's the good thing. So the first step, if you were to go through this, is to adopt these principles for a sustainable event. And so have you guys heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals? There's 17 of them. It's okay if you have not. They're like pretty abstract. But they're basically a universal set of, I guess, criteria, or not criteria, of, I guess, practices that can be applied to anything. So any corporation, any, a city, a state, any organization should, these are the 17 principles for sustainability. And so the Event Industry Council aligned our standard to those goals. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, and I'm sure if you want this presentation, it will be available. But these are those sustainable development goals. So it's, to have no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education. You can all read. So these are all, good things that we all want. But I think, they can be a little abstract to take it from this list and apply it to what you can do as an event organizer. But you can. So the first one, no poverty. So Natural Products Expo, it's a huge trade show. They're actually based out of Boulder. But they have like 2 shows a year. It's 100,000 people in California and 50,000 in, it was Baltimore, now Philadelphia. But they have a community benefit concert. And so as part of their sustainability program, they have this concert, they have exhibitors donate product, and then their attendees can go through and do a bag stuffing, and it's then donated to the local community. So it's a really fun way to get people like engaged, and they make money off of it because they sell that sponsorship to that community event, and it's a great way for those people to get their product out there, and it's just a lot of fun, and it addresses the no poverty of the Sustainable Development Goals. Another one would be, food donations. So these are just some like tangible ways to kind of relate to the Sustainable Development Goals. This is another one, reduced inequalities. So do any of you guys have like scholarships or, for even CFEA, probably. And so, anything like you might have for that, or student discounts, really looking at a way to bring your event and your content to a bigger audience that might not be able to attend otherwise. I think this is going to be a big one, and we'll get into more detail, but number 12 of the Sustainable Development Goals is responsible consumption and production. And so that's something that we can affect very easily in the events industry, just our signage alone. So making decisions to eliminate foam core and vinyl from your signage selection, hopefully going for like some sort of fiberboard if possible, or even better, some sort of like cardboard or honeycomb or falcon board or reusable signs or digital signs. So just kind of having that thought process in your head. Climate action, we work with Greenbuild. They have some really incredible greenhouse gas calculating, and so this just shows a breakdown, though. They've been doing this for many, many years, and it's pretty sophisticated, but it shows a breakdown of where their greenhouse gases come from for their events, and then they partner with people to offset those. This is another example, Natural Products. They made a goal to eliminate single-use plastics by 2022, and they talked about that through all their shows. And human trafficking, that's another big one in the events industry, and so there is to train your staff or ask the venues that you go to if they train their staff about being able to identify human trafficking and doing trainings around that. And then the last one, just example to give, is just partnership for the goals, is just how we partner all the time, right? To achieve something in the events industry. We're always working with our suppliers and various stakeholders, and so doing that for your sustainability goals. So that was obviously not going through all of the sustainable development goals, but just wanted to show some examples of like some tangible things that you can do to something that kind of seems a little bit intangible sometimes, I think. And you know, there's a lot of other things that you can do to support those as well. So then the second step is to, the Events Industry Council created industry-wide requirements. So these are things that everyone needs to do. So if you are an event organizer, you have to do these. If you're a supplier, you also have to do these. And again, they're pretty basic, but they're universal, and they bring everyone to kind of a common playing field. So I'm not going to go through these, but you know, it's things like having a sustainability policy, having a plan, having someone designated to help implement that plan. You know, some things that you would just want to have anyways. And then the third step is to then really get into the nitty-gritty of the actions. So you'll see for the suppliers, everyone has criteria in all those different areas. So you know, that checklist has things that you can do in all those areas. And for an event organizer, there is criteria for each of your suppliers, kind of, and your own internal practices. And then the step 4 is if you're going to go for platinum, you can go for innovation points. All right, so that is kind of the quick overview of how the standard would work. You know, you have those 4 different steps. But then what I wanted to do is just take a quick moment to go through what that would look like if you were an event organizer going to a venue, and how that would actually like play out. So the biggest, just with anything, I guess, the biggest way to, I guess, that I wouldn't call it a mistake, but the, I guess, misstep I get working from the venue side, from an event organizer perspective, is, you know, I will have an event organizer come to me after the event's over and say, that was great, thank you for, you know, having recycling in place, now I want all of my metrics for this, or I want to know about that. And at that point, it's kind of beyond the fact, right? Like, I wasn't necessarily tracking for that. I didn't know, you know, it was part of an overall program. And so communicating as much in advance as possible is really the best step, just like with anything. So the first step is to really put any of your sustainability requests into an RFP, making sure that, you know, that is part of, just like you're asking about, you know, room size and capacity, you're also asking, what are you doing for sustainability, in very specific questions. And then once you get that, verify on your site visit or your follow-up conversations that that is actually what they said they can do, they can actually do. And then go a step further and include that in your contracts. So if, you know, you're an event organizer, you come to me and I say, yes, I will have recycled content toilet paper in all my restrooms. Ask and say, okay, that's great, you're gonna have that. And then when you're on, and then put that in the contract so that if I actually don't follow through with what I said I was gonna do as a supplier, that there is some sort of consequence to that, just like any other action that you put into your RFP and your contract. And so that's really important. And then you need to also make sure that you're following up with that even further and including, you know, all of those requests again in your event specs so that they know again that this is something that you're expecting to see. And then I always make sure that it's brought up again at the pre-con, and then when I'm on site, I always ask for a site I asked to be taken back of house. I want to see the things that I asked for, that they're actually happening. And then the final, I guess, a way to kind of monitor and make sure that everything happened, that we said we were going to, you know, to check on what we put into place, I asked for that to be included in a report, so a post-event report. So whether that's waste diversion, what percentage of the food might have been local, what my energy consumption was while we were on site, all of those things. If I asked for it in the RFP and I communicated that's something I wanted to know and have information on, then I make sure that I get some sort of verification at the end. Does that make sense? So these are just some examples of different things that you can ask for as they relate to the APEX standard. So you can see they're not, rocket science questions, but they are impactful. So, asking for reduced lighting levels at move in and move out, that actually saves significant amounts of energy. Having limited escalators, these are the things. And then when I go on site, if I put that in my RFP, and then the lighting levels are at 100%, then, that's something that I can point to and say, hey, we really do need these lights at 50%, or often, this area that's not being used at all. And then, again, asking for them to provide that event data at the show close. Similarly, these are, again, just examples pulled from the APEX standards of different things to be asking for around waste management for your venue. So making sure that your bins are put together, they're clearly labeled, those types of things. And this is an example of just kind of how I worked on a show and we partnered to really kind of, it seemed like a small effort, but it really had a pretty big impact. So NAMM is the National Association of Music Merchandisers. It was one of the last shows I went to back in January, but it's like 120,000 people. It's really big. And it's at the Anaheim Convention Center, and they partnered with Martin Guitars and Reverb. It's a music trade show, and to provide water bottles to attendees. And so then with that action, so that was a sponsorship between NAMM and Martin and Reverb. So Martin provided the water bottles and handed them out, and had some sort of a sponsorship agreement with them. But then the Anaheim Convention Center was able to, we let them know that this was a program we were doing, and we needed to have some sort of metric to report back. And so they had water fill stations that we could measure how many people used them. So they went through for us, and they went to see what the water fill count was at the beginning of the show through the end of the show. And they were able to have a metric for that. And so, Martin was really excited about that. They weren't expecting it. And it was something that then NAMM could use to expand that program. Because I think last year it was only 1,000 water bottles were given out to, over 100,000 people. Were available for a 100,000 person event. And so that, allowed, just having that metric allowed that to be expanded. So it's really important, like I said, just to ask your venues, ask your suppliers how they can help support your programs. Another one, air quality. So pretty simple, but you'd be surprised, like the no idling, very few places actually enforce that, but it actually makes a big impact. And then community, so being able to offer, donate materials after the event, ask your supplier or your venue about that, work with your exhibitors, work with your attendees to be able to do some things like that. And then accessibility and inclusivity. So making sure that the rooms that you're creating, there's, and this will probably not be a thing as much, but there's space between your aisles and your table sets, and for people with wheelchairs to get through. And it was really interesting. Because 2 years ago, I had ankle surgery, and then I had to go on show site, and I was had crutches, and I had like a scooter that I'd kind of go back and forth on, and it was the first time that that I'm like fortunate enough that I'm able-bodied, but I wasn't at that time, and I really realized how challenging it was for someone that might not be able to use stairs easily and open doors. And how challenging that was. And none of our signage supported that. Often the elevator was like on the other side of like the convention center. And so many of those buttons that like open the doors automatically like didn't work. It was just very eye-opening for a very short period of time of like how frustrating that was for me, and really kind of after that point, I've really made such a, or after that experience, I've made such a point when talking with my clients to make sure that they're asking these questions. And I have one client who actually does a site visit in a wheelchair to, like, one person on their team has that, so that they can really experience and see what that's like, and that's how they plan their signage and things like that. So again, you know, sustainability isn't just about environment, but really looking at what your community is. And then, yeah, again, I'm just, going through these really fast, but these are just some organizational questions that you can also ask any of your suppliers. And these are just some sample language, so it doesn't have to be, complicated. It doesn't have to be super strict. It can just say, what are you doing? And then, you know, have these questions in there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, so just some simple things like, or things like we talked about. So, you know, do you currently track your property's waste waste production? What's your diversion rate? You know, just really, and maybe they can, maybe they can't, but, you know, letting them know that that's something that you're interested in, and it starts that conversation, I think, is the most important part. And, you know, coming from a venue perspective, I think the more and more, that's a question that I would often get asked by, like, my general manager and from other people like Visit Denver. Like, you know, people will say, like, do people care that you have these programs in place? You know, do they even ask for it? And the more that people ask for it, then the more that I can justify to, you know, the event or to my general manager and to other people, like, yes, people are interested in this. Yes, people do want these practices in place. And I think sometimes event organizers just assume it's going to be there, and then they're disappointed when they don't see it. So ask the question, and then you might be the show that kind of is the catalyst for making that happen. The Green Bill that was in Denver in 2006, and that is what started the Colorado Convention Center's recycling program. They asked for a recycling program. There wasn't one in place, and they put one in place, and it stuck. Same with the DNC in 2008. They were asking for compost. We didn't have a compost program, but we got one in place for the DNC. And after you've done all the work to train up your staff, you're not going to go back. So, you know, event organizers really have an opportunity to create some real significant change just by having a conversation with your suppliers.
Can I ask you a question about the waste management?
Yeah.
So I work up in the mountains, and it is a hot topic, this whole sustainability thing as far as recycling and composting and that sort of thing. And in all of the research and all of the conversations that I've had with different waste management entities is that it's really a labor over thing, because in order to separate people are stupid.
Yeah.
You know, if mom's standing there with her 3-year-old and he's tugging on her and she has to throw something away that probably should be recycled or should probably be going into the compost pile, she's not going to be paying attention. So there's that piece. And then the other side of it, too, is where's it going?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's a misnomer up in the mountains, at least what we're finding, is that, yes, you can compost, but there's no place to compost.
Yeah.
And so it's having to use fossil fuels to ship it to another location, so you're not really curing any problems there. Yes, it's not going into the landfill. The other conversation is about single stream versus dual stream on your recycling. You know, which is better, which is worse? What does your local recycling center do versus what maybe something in the city would do?
Yeah.
And what recycling centers can handle certain kinds of waste. So we've had to set up our waste management programs where, okay, exhibitors, vendors, you can only have compostable, but then what's that compostable? Well, then it's kind of moot. It might as well just go in the landfill because it's just as bad. So that's the kind of like dichotomy that we're fighting
Yeah.
in the hills. But it's a perception thing. Like, if you're not doing composting and you're not doing zero waste, then your event is not looked upon favorably. Does that make, am I making sense?
No, you absolutely are making sense. Where are you in the mountains? Just curious.
I'm technically up in Eagle County,
Okay.
but I work in multiple resort
Yeah.
communities, so Aspen, Vail, Steamboat,
Yeah.
Summit County.
Okay. I live in Crested Butte. Yeah, no. So I know it's a very, it's a really important point that you're making. Yeah, so many people, that's where that conversation has to happen. So you do, it's not as easy as saying we're going to get compostable serviceware and, you know, we know that that's not where the conversation ends. You do have to say, okay, if we're, you know, so here we go. Question number 5, please highlight which are actually recyclable through your facility. So asking that venue, you know, do you recycle glass? A lot of places don't recycle glass. I think Denver started recycling glass 2 years ago. Before that, it was all just like road-based. So like you do have to go down that and ask those questions. And yeah, a lot of places, not even in the mountain communities, more and more facilities are not accepting those PLAs, so like the compostable plastics. So going back to that show in Anaheim, that's Natural Products. It's huge. It's a food trade show, and they were trying to do this zero plastics goal. But in Anaheim, even though it's California, there is no place to actually. They won't accept the compostable plastics, the PLAs, because it is really hard to break down. And so that's a really big issue that we are really working at. Do we use reusables? And we partnered with a company that's actually out of Boulder that does reusable ramekins. And we tried that, like piloting that on a very small scale. And, you know, it's not an easy, like, one-fits-all solution anywhere. Another issue that we're starting to see in sustainability, especially with regards to the compostables, those PLAs, the cornstarch PLAs, are actually, there's a shortage of them now because so many people are buying them and actually not even composting them. And, you know, there's some unintended consequences there. And so now it's actually really hard to get that. So before the pandemic, we actually had Eco Products reach out to me because we use that at all the arts and venues, and they said, just so you know, we're anticipating a shortage of this product, so you might need to, you know, figure out something else because we don't know. And our waste diversion depends on composting. And so we were then switching gears, and now we were looking at Ball Corporation, which is the aluminum cups that a lot of people are, you know, you might see a lot of venues are kind of switching to that, and those are infinitely recyclable, and there's a lot of great advantages. But yes, like it's a conversation, and there's no like easy checkmark solution, especially when, you know, it seems like it should be so simple, but it really isn't. But you have to find out what's happening in your location and where is it going to go, and then communicate to your attendees so that they know why you have what you have in place. But yes. Yeah.
So kind of what you were saying too about the labor, do you think the
Yeah.
most important part of this is having labor and a plan for accountability? And we were meeting with EcoCycle about doing some labor, and it was kind of disappointing because for them too, that they said they do all these events and it's a lot of optics, but
Mhm.
they're not there. They don't have people making sure everything happens exactly the right way. You know, they left at 5 o'clock at a big festival, and then somebody threw something in it, and then the whole dumpster goes to the landfill
Yeah.
because it's contaminated. So people, like she's saying, you know, compost. It's like people love the word compost, but if it doesn't work in that one spot, you know, how do you manage all that? How do you to make it so it's not just about optics, but it's also about making it effective, you know, and affordable.
Yeah.
All of that, because I couldn't believe it, because he was saying how much they have to do, and the second they step away, you know, it's like, everyone's like, oh, well, we did this, you know, we recycled, we did this, but they didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was contaminated.
Well, and that's why I do always, I mean, and yeah, it's, I think I work with some clients where we hire back of house sorters, and, you know, I've sorted so much trash in my life. And you do that, and I think the other way to kind of reduce that labor is really controlling what you're allowing to come into your events or what you're allowing your vendors to bring. I mean, you know, here, like we had, like what you see here, all the china and bottles, like that is that's nice because that's all getting reused. Like none of that is going in a landfill, but that doesn't happen often especially for large events. But if you can just try to control, so I know one adage that I'm starting to hear from like eco products is anything you eat on should be compostable, anything you drink should be recyclable. So that's where, because once food's on something, it can't be, even if it's like a recyclable plastic, which there really aren't any like recyclable plastic plates, but that would be contaminated anyways. But, you know, I wish there was like an easier answer than that. I think it's signage, it's communicating, it's having, you know, people back of house sorting.
So you have to hire people to manage this, otherwise it's not gonna be effective, right? Because
Yeah.
bins and dumpsters.
Oh, people don't pay attention. I know. And even, you know, to not, the people that stand at the bins, I don't think that they're effective either. They start talking to each other, even if they're passionate about sustainability, they don't. But yeah, you know, I also, so yeah, kind of working with your housekeeping staff, the janitorial staff, getting volunteers if you can to sort back of house, I think is always way more effective than anything front of house, but people don't like sorting people's trash, especially probably after COVID. That's going to be an even bigger challenge. Yeah, I think I think what we try to do is just control what's going into those trash cans as much as possible, and then communicate as much as possible clearly, and then really, you know, understanding that you're not going to, I mean, I work for events, you know, for over like 12 years. I still wouldn't call any of my events zero waste. Like, I just think that that's not something that, you know, where we're at right now. And so you just try to manage that. But I asked for metrics, and I was trying to improve on that year to year. But that's, you know, it's probably not the easiest, like, it's not the answer anyone really wants to hear, but it's realistic. Yeah. Yeah.
You have a measurable, you know, system that shows what you've achieved and you've actually done, and you can track it.
Yeah. And, you know, yeah, transparency, you know, the Colorado Convention Center, we have been at a 50% diversion rate since like 2010. We cannot get over it. We cannot like figure out that next, we have a goal of 60% for like the last 5 years. And, you know, Tim and I used to work together at McNichols. You know, Red Rocks achieves that, and the Arts Complex achieves that because they sort every single piece of trash. But they still have, you know, Red Rocks, I think this past, looking at 2019, I think their diversion rate was like 77%. And they have someone that's diverting everything. Yeah.
Which was to address that, the expense aspect of it is, you know, Red Rocks can afford it because they build it in the cost of ticket and blah, blah, blah. You know, and it does go back to that expense of what it costs to be able to do that at the same time. You know, the costs are still there. You know, it does increase that cost on it, and you know, but it's viable, right? It's out there, because for Red Rocks, the size of the concerts that they're doing at 77%, it's huge.
Totally. But what, you know, and how they got there though, you know, they now totally we eliminated straws and lids from all the cups. All the foods is in compostable containers. Then they have aluminum for their beer cans. So, you know, like, it's not like it's a free-for-all. And then also another thing we actually did do to offset some of the costs of that is set up our contracts with our haulers where we pay more for landfill and we pay less for recycling, and we pay less for composting. So actually, I did an analysis for the summer. If we were to, for Red Rocks, if we were to remove all the compost bins, what would that be? Because assuming then that everything would be recyclable or compostable. And I think it was an increase of like based on 2019 numbers, it was like an increase of like $10,000 in hauling costs. That's not, you know, the sorting costs, but in hauling costs. And then I did, okay, if we eliminated all the recycling and the compost bins, and it was an increase of $40,000 for hauling costs. So, you know, if you do kind of some of your work on the pre-end of working with your contractors ahead of time to say this is what we require that if you're going to work here in your contract, and then with our haulers to say support us in our recycling and our diversion efforts and pay, you know, we'll pay you more for landfill because that's a true cost, right? And the others, recycling and compost, are actually commodities. So, sorry, that I don't even know.
You
what
know,
time
one
it
other
is.
thought that I had for you over there too is how you're organizing your actual event, like the actual layout of your event. So I run the Steamboat Hot Air Balloon Festival up in Steamboat Springs, and one of the things that we did with our sustainability council up there was where you place your trash cans, because I think, and for that matter porta potties too, but if you place them in multiple locations it confuses the public, whereas if you it depends on your venue too. But what we did with our venue is we had 2 banks of trash cans, and there was trash can recycling, trash can recycling, trash can recycling, or a whole section of trash and a whole section of recycling all together. And then you can reduce your labor next to that bank, that giant bank, and then maybe on the other side you have a mirror bank. So you're really only having to have like 2 or 3 people in each bank to kind of keep an eye on those trash cans, and then one gets full, they haul it away, replace it with a clean one, and then someone's in the back doing the sorting or whatever, or just making sure that the contamination. So that reduced our labor, but we still had the same number of people, whereas the year before we had trash cans and recycling everywhere, and it was like Labor City. So that was one way that we utilized the layout of our event to monitor how we were handling all of our trash and our recycling. We've never gotten to the composting thing because composting is not,
In
for
the
lack of a better
mountains,
word,
it's some
sustainable
pot-
right
yeah,
now.
Yeah, it's hard.
But that was how we handled that. So I don't know if that helps, but I thought I'd throw that at the group.
Yeah, I think that, and that's where, you know, in that one of those first slides, I showed, you know, I really see sustainability as an opportunity to be strategic and innovative. You know, once you know that this is a goal, you have to figure out a way to accomplish that. And we, you know, in your set budget, and they're, you know, we're all smart people. Once you start thinking about these things and kind of, you know, working it through, there are solutions to it. So how much time do I have? Sorry, I didn't bring my, it's been so long since I've been in front of a crowd, I haven't okay. So, you know, similar things, talking about procurement and energy. And again, you know, you can have this, or I have the standards you can use, or you can have, I'll send a link. But the other thing too, just once you're on site, communicate at the BRECon, this is our goal. Request a tour to see those people sorting it, see what they're doing, see, like you said, you know, who's going to, when I go home at 5, who's going to be here from, you know, 7 to 9 to make sure that this is happening. Just like you would have to have someone in there, you know, that accountable for pulling the waste anyways. Who's the person that's managing that, the recycling aspect of it? And then, you know, thank them. Let them know that you see what they're doing is, you see them, and that, you know, recognize how impactful that is. And I always make sure, I mean, if I'm not just sorting trash with them back there anyways, going back there just to let them know how important it is to our goals and how important they are. So this is just a form. Again, I'll share any documents that you might want, but just how do you ask for the information ahead of time? So I just wanted to get through this I wanted to get to this part because I think this, as we, kind of like the first part of my presentation, I feel like was how we did things before. And I think, you know, as we're all trying to figure out what it's going to be like when we start planning events again, I mean, I guess you guys did because you planned this event. But what does that mean, and, you know, how can we still have sustainability as a piece of that equation? And so I just kind of put together, these are just my own assumptions of like talking with people in the industry. And so obviously, like, I love the conversational piece and what you guys are hearing or thinking. But I think we all know, like, obviously there's going to be an increase in cleaning costs, new protocols around PPE, sanitation, all these things that, you know, in my network, everyone's like freaking out, like this is just like another piece of trash that we're gonna have to deal with. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the silver linings to that? And so when I'm talking with some of my clients about, our planning for 2021, we're really taking the time, because we have the time right now, to look at all of our products and really see what can we eliminate from that, that we, just had as an assumption of something that we just always bought before. And then, so what can be eliminated, what can be like reduced in terms of quantity, or what can be replaced as a new item to be more sustainable. Another trend that I feel like I had been pushing with clients for a long time and always received a lot of pushback was carpet. And more shows I'm hearing, they're just saying we're just going to eliminate carpet from trade shows because that's like more cleaning. And so that's a big one because carpet's a huge waste between everything. Yeah.
You should know because we own a rental company.
Yes.
The carpet lasts 1 or 2 shows and it's
Yeah.
it's trash. I mean, it's like we just had to fill a roll-off full of expo carpet.
Totally.
Has nothing to do with it. It's terrible. Don't ever use carpet.
Totally. Yeah.
Don't want to touch it.
Well, and I know, not picking on Freeman or GES, but yes, that's, then they're like, oh, we reuse it. I'm like, well, you can maybe reuse it maybe 3 times. Yeah, a booth and then maybe an aisle, but then, yeah, it's not.
Been in the business a long time and it's so much trash. There's nothing you can do.
Totally. Well, and then, so think about the car show at the Colorado Convention Center. 600,000 square feet of carpet, because obviously the exhibit halls aren't carpeted. So that's 600,000 square feet of carpet and padding. It has to be brand new looking carpet because no one wants the used carpet for their booth, And then all that has to have 600,000 square foot of reinforced visqueen plastic over it while the cars are driving in and people are moving around. So when you start looking at those things, and all of that's thrown away. And that's just one show at one convention center for, 2 weekends. And so, yes, if we can get rid of carpet, huge win. But so many people will say, and we did have Outdoor Retailer has started to eliminate carpet before all this. I think PCMA eliminated carpet at their show. It was a trend that was starting to happen, but not as often. So, hey, there's a silver lining maybe. And you save money. You save a lot of money because carpet's expensive. Another one, I'd love to see exhibitor waste bins removed because those are just all landfill. They don't, you don't sort those. Those aren't sorted. They're all landfill. They're free-for-alls. Make people use the bins around. Another new normal assumption is, I think obviously people aren't going to want to just take a bunch of random stuff that other people have touched. And so this is actually a picture from an event, an Earth Day event, of an exhibitor that just had all this useless plastic stuff promoting their sustainability program. So I'm hoping that this is the end of these types of products. So, and we'll start to see a switch to more mobile technologies that exist. So less, having less programs, books, magazines, trade show publications, all of those things that are printed, shipped, there's labor to put them out, there's labor to remove them because they're inevitably like stacks and stacks and stacks left at the end of the show. And then there's labor to throw them away. And so I think that's another way that we could, as an industry, reduce waste and save money as well. And then eliminate those pointless giveaways. We talked about this a little bit, but the new normal that people aren't going to want to sort waste anymore. This is an opportunity to re-examine how your waste is collected and produced. This is sorting at an actual event. Those people, before we took a lot of precautions around it. I don't know how that's going to be received. We'll see. The attendees won't travel, right? Obviously, I think these hybrid meetings are here to stay. But the opportunity there is there's new attendee base. There's people that weren't able to come before that can now come, or people that didn't want to travel or maybe couldn't have come for disabilities or cost concerns. And so now we have an opportunity to kind of widen the breadth of influence, and more people and more perspectives is a better group, I think. Let's go through some of these quick. You know, I don't know if we'll ever see, well, we have buffet stations here. Again, I haven't been to an event, so I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. So, you know, are we going to have buffets anymore? I think we will. But is this, you know, an opportunity to really get people to commit to whether they're eating or not, and maybe help reduce food waste, which is obviously such a prolific problem in our industry. You know, if we have people that have to serve now, then maybe that would help attendees control serving size, maybe have less options, maybe more plant-based options. I don't know. Then also, we talk about, you know, food donation concerns. There's already the Good Samaritan Act to protect people for donating, so you are not held liable, and they're needed now more than ever. I think you know, there's so many articles out on that, and we're starting to see, so, you know, donate your food if you can still. Pardon? I think it's the big excuse. It's been out since like 1994. Yeah. It's the biggest excuse that you'll hear from like any hotel or any food and beverage, but it's if you donate food in good faith and you know, you're not pulling stuff from your trash bin or something, you can't be held accountable for it. Yes. You should, yeah, look it up. Yeah, and that's, you know, it is something where, yeah, so many, you know, chefs, again, when you just have that conversation, we want to have a food donation program, and they say that, then you're able to share that with them and help them establish that. Yeah. 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 It's, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's like MGM in Las Vegas. They just spent like $1 million creating a technology where they flash freeze food now, because they would create so much, then they couldn't like donate it at a fast enough rate, I guess, before it would like, you know, spoil. So now they flash freeze all of their food, and then they hold on to it, and so they can donate it to local pantries around there. But yeah. Well, good. There's a good takeaway from this one. Perfect. Again, just talking about, hopefully we'll have more local food, you know, using, there's like disruption to the food chain with, so maybe this is an opportunity to, you know, procure more local items, share menus with other groups in-house, be flexible. If you just say, I just want a vegetable, does it have to be broccoli? Can it be zucchini? Like, does it really matter? You know, be flexible. You can save money that way too. And then I think this is the other thing. It's the new normal, hopefully, is just that as an industry, we're aware of implicit bias at our events. I actually took a training 2 days ago about diversity and inclusivity. And it was really interesting because she was talking about, you know, these cultural norms and how, you know, around food was the example she was using. And it reminded me of, I did a McDonald's. They're actually a very sustainable trade show. But I did their event probably like 10 years ago. And it was the only show I've ever seen where they had, for their breakfast, they had, you know, eggs and bagels and all that. But then they had like fish and rice. They had a breakfast that actually welcomed, you know, the diversity of their attendees. So it wasn't just a sign like in multiple languages. It was actually, they were, you know, accepting and welcoming cultures from, you know, they knew that they had attendees from multiple cultures, and they were accommodating all those different food preferences and cultural preferences. And that was, I haven't seen it since, so it was like the only time, but it really reminded me of that, you know, like to strive to be more welcoming and open to all the attendees of your events. And then just remember, this isn't forever, just right now. But I do think that this is an opportunity to be more strategic, to increase collaboration, raise awareness around diversity, equity, and inclusivity, be more mindful, and be more sustainable. So that's that. Sorry, that was a really mad rush of a presentation, but I hope you got some takeaways. Yeah.
So my question is kind of all over the place, but I'm going to try and center as much as possible. How do you change or shift the mental game of sustainability?
Yeah.
For example, like my son's second birthday, the Pinterest of the world. Why do I need all this tchotchke crap?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's not going to matter, but I feel like I need it. At events, why do we need all this unnecessary things? People are going to find what they came to look
Mm-hmm.
for, whether it's food, the restrooms, understanding what the like the signage stuff,
Yeah.
the banners. Like, how do we just change the mind shift of like what we've been so accustomed to think is normal and that we should be doing?
Yeah.
At least not necessarily.
It is. It's, yeah, we're having to create new norms, you know, like it's the carpet thing where, or the, yeah, I mean, how many of us need 20 signs to find a bathroom in like a mall or something? You know, you figure it out, you find it, you don't have to, you don't need a sign every 3 feet to tell you. And so, yes, I think just consciously, you know, I think, you know, for so long I've been saying like, okay, we need to just like create change slowly. You know, if you want to switch to a mobile app, you have your mobile app, and then you also have to have the printed program for people because you have to have both, right? But I think at some point, like we just need to, as an industry, just start making the decision to, and I think, you know, again, if we're going to find a silver lining around COVID, maybe this is the time to say, you know what, we're not having handouts anymore because people don't want to use the mobile app. We're not going to have these giveaways because of this, or, you know, like this is, use it as an excuse for, you know, we can, to really just look at where can you know, obviously don't, if it's something that's really important to your attendees, you don't want to take that away. You know, start with the like low-hanging fruit that they won't notice. You know, I was talking to a group, doing training with them, and they're oil and gas company, and they're like, we're not going to go to, you know, vegan meals. They'll lose their minds. It's like, okay, you don't have to do that. Like, let's, you know, like, let's think of something else that we can do. You know, you don't have to, you know your audience as well. So like, kind of think about what are the low-hanging fruits of things they might not notice or that they wouldn't be as big of a pain point to them, and just like start chipping away at it. Or another one, you know, on the printed programs thing, for an event, Sustainable Brands, even that show was like, people want their programs, they want their programs. I'm like, these are like chief sustainability officers for large corporations. Like, do they need a hand program? And so we put in the registration, I will commit to using the mobile app instead, and it was a required question, instead of asking for a printed program. And, you know, 70% of the people checked that box, so we only made, you know, 30% of the expected attendees programs. And, you know, and it was a slow thing, and if someone asked that, we could actually look up their record, you know, I don't think they did this, but they could have looked up their registration to say, no, you actually committed to a mobile app. You know, I don't know. But, you know, communicate with them, let them know why the change is happening, and then just build on it.
My follow-up question to that
Yeah.
is that we recently traveled to California, went shopping at a Walmart. We were staying in an Airbnb, got some groceries, and then at the end, I forget that California has no plastic bags.
Oh,
And I always try and do like the reusable, and then if they're not in my car, then I'm like, okay, can you see where it has plastic bags? So we of course then bought like 4 or 5 of the, you know,
Reusable.
reusable bags. But at what point do you think sustainability efforts will be unified throughout the U.S.?
I know.
Because even in Oregon, right, like you have to bring your own mug to Starbucks.
Yeah.
They will no longer serve you out of a cup with a straw, nothing. So if you go through that drive-thru, you don't have anything, you don't get a drink.
Yeah.
I would be shocked and disappointed my Starbucks if I
Yeah.
did that. But why wouldn't we do that?
I know.
It's their drink, right? And so at what point, and will it ever be that unified?
I mean, I think, our nation is, it's really hard to, we can't even have like a mask mandate. I don't know. I do know that before all this, with the city and county, I mean, even Colorado, I was working with the Mayor's Advisory Council to try to look at plastic bag bans, and we have them in Boulder. We have them all around the city, but we don't have one in Denver. And it's not because people aren't working on it. It's just this huge political ask and we were working on it, and we were, getting support from like Kroger and all of these different, retailers and grocery store outlets, and, thinking about like low income bag giveaways, so many different ways to do it. And then COVID came, and now all of the grocery stores are saying you can't bring your reusable bag. It's such a 2-step forward, 1-step back process, unfortunately. So I guess focus on your own individual efforts. It's hard. It's like, it's really hard, and COVID just put a real wrench in everything.
This isn't really a question, it was a comment from Lex's question. A couple years ago, we went to Seattle, my wife and I on vacation, and then we went to Iowa, and we,
Oh, wow.
holy shit, in Seattle, they shoot you if you
Yeah.
keep the trash out.
Right.
In Iowa, they're like, I've never seen take-home bags.
I heard of that. Yeah. I know. It's just, the norms of people. Okay.
And COVID aside, we'll just have to deal with that as it comes, but I think that in an outdoor festival, I've only seen a few places that have good water stations offering water bottles, either just a gigantic tank that I question, or having it attached to a building somewhere that has a fresh water source. Have you seen a good system for that, and how is it set up?
I don't work as much in the festivals world. Only from like what I've attended. Yeah. And pretty much it's like a cow trough where, you're just like putting your, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you work a lot more in festivals. Yeah.
It's kind of I've been moving toward using fresh water off of buildings. I don't trust the temps either, because they're sitting out in the sun and they're getting warm, and like there's not really any quality way of keeping the water cold.
Yeah.
So I've never really done that direction, unless you have a clean dryer and all the things that go with that. And there are mechanisms and ways to get quality fresh tap water out of the building off of a hose. And it's all about marketing and branding, but you also just need to put on your plumbing cap or get a plumber to help you to put it together. And then all it is just rigging it every year. You know what I mean? Once you get the system built, you can just put it on like sawhorses or whatever and just rig it so that you have the water filtration through a hose. It's easy enough to do, but as far as
The last time I
like
saw one of those at a
people who
festival.
get really weird, where I have run into issues though is beer garden situations, because in order for you to take a beverage from outside of a beer garden and bring it into it, it has to be a sealed beverage container, right? So AKA plastic bottles, which is never ideal as far as from a sustainability standpoint. I mean, you can recycle and whatnot, but where that kind of brings in is allowing people to bring in their Nalgene bottles or their own water bottles or whatever, or soft-sided coolers, but then you're talking about more in labor as far as like your back checking and that sort of thing. But I mean, I used to do a festival that was 5,000, 6,000 people every year, and we allowed soft-sided coolers and empty containers or sealed containers, and then we ended up getting rid of the sealed containers. But then we started having issues because our vendors were outside of the beer garden, and so if someone wanted to get like a lemonade from Mr. Lemonade, who has the most amazing lemonade, you can't bring it into the venue. So it's a play. I think it's about your value.
And now all that's been thrown out the window.
Oh, yeah.
It's an alcoholic free-for-all.
I know. Every place is New Orleans.
Unless you're a security company.
You touched on this earlier, but I'd be interested in getting more of your perspective for two things, and that's incentivizing exist that you're talking about for the individual at an event specifically, and then incentivizing it for either organizations or vendors or things like that. And like I understand, like obviously you can put regulations on it. There could be governmental regulations that do things, but I guess the first question is like incentivizing it for the individual to reuse. Like the first example that comes to mind is like, say you buy a beer in a plastic cup. If you bring that plastic cup back to that vendor, they get 20% off of their next beer.
Yeah.
And then that, you figure that into like a give back to the vendor or something. Have you ever done anything like that? And how like could you expand that?
Yeah.
I mean, or can you? And,
They're doing it, I think it was like a Bruce Springsteen concert or something like that. They were selling the metal cups, and that was, or it was a deposit, and that was how you drank all night.
and then you get like free refills.
And then you get, you know, yeah, you were incented on your, you know, your refills and all that, and then you could check your cup back in, you know, to recycle everything, and, you know, the gimmick was, you know, you got your deposit back, and if you didn't turn it back in, you just lost your money.
Or you get a free cup.
Yeah, so,
Well, so
Yeah.
how do you do
There-
that with not drinks? Because I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people maybe are doing that with drinks, but you talked about a lot of different things that I mean,
Yeah.
carpeting, like I haven't thought about that as being
Yeah.
a thing.
We-
But,
Yeah, if you're at a hotel. Well, there are some really cool, you can gamify it. So again, with utilizing kind of mobile technologies, I've worked with clients to really gamify their sustainability programs. So first thing you have to do is, you know, when you sign into the app, you get a commitment, you know, make a pledge to these 5 things, you know, and then those relate in some way. There's some really cool, 5 actions or something. Then you can talk about those and you can do things, there's like steps programs, fitness programs, that you can kind of gamify. There's a really cool company called Fill It Forward, and they were, in response to, I was talking with the client about where we're always like, bring your refillable water bottle. And then one of my clients was like, I bring my refillable water bottle and I forget it in my hotel room. And then I just get a bottle, how do you know? And so I was doing some research and I found this company, Fill It Forward, and they have a sticker, and you can scan an app and you can scan it every time you fill it. It's on our system. But then every time that you fill it, you can, so if you're an event, you can have that for like my event. So CFEA could say, okay, everyone here gets this, put this on your water bottle. And collectively, if we, refill 500 water bottles over the course of an event, they take that and they pay for water projects in other countries. So it's really cool. And you get little badges for, as much as you do that. And so it's an interesting way to like hold people kind of accountable, so you're not just like have 20 refillable water bottles in your hotel room that you keep going and buying one because you forget because you have so many other things going on. And it also is like a cool metric, again, kind of going back to before, if then you're able to say, and actually I found out about them through PCMA, you can say PCMA attendees refilled their water bottles 25,000 times and supported a new water filtration system in, this country. And so that's kind of cool. I think there's so many technologies out there right now to take advantage of. And then from the venue side, it really, in the Colorado Convention Center, we charge for landfill. They don't charge for recycling or compost. So as an event producer, if you're coming and you have your, your fees of everything you have to pay, if you recycle 100%, if you're like everything you bring in is recyclable or compostable, you don't have any landfill. You don't have any trash fees. And that's something, I've really, we've talked about it a lot. But to me, because you hear people that say they want to, green has to be more expensive. And it's like, why wouldn't we, our goals are around sustainability. Why wouldn't we incentivize the event organizers that are supporting our program and making our lives easier? And so we're trying to really switch that narrative around. Yes?
The last thing, because I know we're way over time, but can you just talk about the program for event organizers
Yeah, so through the Event Industry Council, yeah, so there's the Sustainable Event Practitioners course, I believe it is. I'm a trainer, I should know that. And so it was in person. Yes, and we talked about doing this for you guys, yeah. So there is there's a course you can take, and it goes through all of these, and it's about a day and a half or 2 days, depending how you want to spread it out, and you do get a certificate at the end. I think if that was something that you guys would be interested in, I think we could, or if there were, if a survey of members they're interested in, we could organize it and get one for the group. Yeah. It's a certification. Yeah, you get a certificate and it's recognized, through the Events Industry Council. And it talks about all of, really the standards, but it kind of goes through all those different areas of accessibility and, really obviously a much deeper dive than what we did here. All right, well, I guess I can, you can send out my information, or I can send some links if you want to send it out to people. And yeah, thanks for having me and bearing with me. My first time speaking in, almost a year.